I got 3 different questions this week to answer that are all around setting limits with our tweens and teens and the frustration that moms are feeling. And maybe that's you here today, and you can say hi. I'd love to personally welcome you. But I thought I'm going to speak to this, and I want to answer the mom's questions. There was 3 different moms, and then I got an email from a mom that is a stepmom to a teenage daughter. And she's been a stepmom to her for 6 years. And so I'm going to answer first the questions, and we're going to talk about setting limits and how that can be such a challenge. And then also, I'm going to talk about step families. So if any of you are dealing with disrespect and setting limits, and your kids breaking your rules, not doing what you're asking them to do, you can just raise your hand and say, that is me. I am struggling with this. And I just want you to know you're in good company, because I got these questions actually from a blog post on the momsoftweensandteens.com site. And the blog post is called Confessions of a Mom with No Boundaries. And I'm telling the story in that blog post about how I did not have boundaries when I was raising my oldest one, who is now 31. When she was a tween and a teen, I really didn't know how to set boundaries with her. I read my first book on boundaries, was the Boundaries book that I highly recommend, by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And they wrote a general boundaries book, and then they also wrote a boundaries book for parenting teenagers. And it's an excellent book. And it was so eye-opening when I read this book. And I thought, no wonder I have migraine headaches. No wonder growing up in my family, I guess you could use the word, I was the designated caretaker in the family. And there were things going on. I was part of a step family. My dad died when I was 10. Then my mom remarried. I had 2 stepsisters, one that was the same age as me. There was a lot of stress going on. I had a little brother that when my dad died was 5. So what did I end up doing? I ended up trying to take care of everybody in my family and everybody else's feelings. And as a result, I didn't have very good boundaries. Now, some of you might have grown up in a family where maybe, it can look different ways. Maybe you had permissive parents and you wanted boundaries. Or maybe you were part of a family that it was very strict. And so maybe you were the good girl, or maybe you snuck out at night, which I did. My mom was, and she's awesome. But she was in some ways, she was very strict, and in other ways, she was very permissive. And I really don't think that parents knew back then really what we were really doing, for those of you that were getting into some trouble like me. But anyway, so, it gets really confusing. And when we didn't grow up in a family that there was good boundaries, it's really hard as a mom to set boundaries. And so I was trying my mom was very strict in some ways and could be more perfectionistic. So I didn't want my daughter to feel that way. So what did I do? I didn't want her to be mad at me, and she was strong-willed. And the truth is, and I don't like to admit it, and I didn't really realize it at the time, I would have denied it, but I wanted her to like me. And I knew you didn't want your kid to be your friend in a way. And I kind of think, we say that, but we do want to have a healthy relationship with them. We do want to work, and I know you're here, we do want to work towards having that close and connected relationship where they feel safe with us and they feel like they can open up and talk to us. That is different than being a friend, where when I think of being your kid's friend, I'm thinking of we don't set boundaries and we don't set limits because we don't want our kids to get upset. All right, let me get over here because I think it's always helpful to read the questions because two of the moms both ended their email with I'm at my wit's end. So who feels like that right now, where you're just pulling your hair out and you're at your wit's end? And I want to say that because it can feel isolating, I really believe, when we're raising our tweens and teens, because we don't feel comfortable talking about it. We don't, we have maybe a friend, maybe their kids are a different age. So they maybe won't get it, or maybe you're scared to talk to a friend about it, or maybe you have a friend and their kid seems like, it just seems easier for them, or you don't want it to get back to you don't want somebody to tell somebody else. Maybe you have shame around it. I can raise my hand to all of these, how I felt with my oldest, or I didn't want to be judged, or I didn't want it to get back to my kid. And so what do? We often feel really isolated and alone, and we feel like we're the only ones. So I just want you to know you're not. And I think we just hit 87,000, all the emails I get, I have a membership that opens up next month. Think about that, get on email me if you want to get on the wait list for that. I do a 3-day free training, an hour every day. And then I open up the membership, but you'll know in there, like, you are not alone. And so that makes us feel so much better. And we feel less crazy and like more calm, because when we feel like it's something's wrong with our kid or something's wrong with us, then, that can lead to a lot of shame and anxiety, really, feeling anxious. So here we go. All right. It's taken a while to kick in. Okay. I am having trouble with my 8-year-old having the same issues that you had. So this is around my confessions of a boundaryless mom. I am tired of screaming at her and controlling her in order to make sure she becomes a respectful, kind, generous, loving person. I am at my wit's end. Okay. Next one from this mom. Everything you have said is exactly my daughter. She pushes every boundary and limit and has no problem lying or manipulating if it will keep her out of trouble. I am at my wit's end and I don't know what to do. And then here's the third one. This is how my life has been the past few years with my 15-year-old, about to be 16-year-old daughter. Thank you for the read, your post. It makes me feel like not such a bad mom now. So, these are all with daughters, but this can happen with sons as well, where you're fighting. I'm hearing from a lot of you where you're struggling with your son, being disrespectful and fighting with them. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do. All right, so I'm going to start with the first one. Here's the mom that's saying that she's tired of screaming at her and controlling her in order to make sure she becomes a respectful, kind, generous, loving person. I get it. I get it. And I want to say a few things. We feel the weight of raising kids that are respectful, that are kind, that are responsible, that are doing what we ask them to do. And so we want all of these things for our kids. And oftentimes when they are not doing what we want them to be doing, or they're doing what we don't want them to be doing, what happens is we fortune tell. We go into the future. And I talked about this last week. And we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, my kid's not picking up after themselves. They are not going to be responsible. If I'm not on them, they are going to become slobs and they are not, fill in the blank, right? So when we fortune tell, we end up ultimately catastrophizing. And it takes us out of the moment and it fuels our anxiety and our frustration. I was saying last week that feelings last, I just heard this research, 90 seconds. 90 seconds. But it's the story that we attach to the feeling that makes it last longer. And this is especially happens with our kids. So it's really important that when your kid is doing something, and I want you to start thinking about this, that you pause and you get in touch with what you're feeling, and then what are you telling yourself? What are you telling yourself? Are you telling yourself that it's going to be your fault if your kid is not responsible, if they're not kind, if they're not, that it's that is on you? And so you better get this kid to be kind, to be responsible. You, as this mom said, she used the word make sure, right? So we can all relate to that. However, that the yelling and the screaming that we do, or the frustration, and I say this out of my own experience, it does not work. It's ineffective. So how do we turn it around? How do we turn that around? Well, start by thinking, where might I be catastrophizing, and storytelling about this kid? And what might just be developmental? What might be some skills that this kid is lacking? And that's the question. That's where we need to make this shift from my kid is a bad kid, that they're not doing this, and I need to control them and make them. See, do you hear that pressure? Do you hear that? And it doesn't work. Why? Because tweens and teens are going to resist you when you're trying to control. And if you want to hear more about me talking about that, watch last week's, because I talk a lot about why control doesn't work. And it has a lot to do with how we're all wired, really. None of us like somebody trying to control us and make us, right? But especially with them, with what they're trying to do developmentally, which is they're trying to pull away and they want more freedom and they want more control. And so there's a real, it kind of sets you up for the perfect storm and for having butting of heads, where you can really be butting heads, because on one hand, your kid is fighting for independence, but they're also impulsive and they don't always make the wisest decisions and they make mistakes, and we don't want them to make mistakes that are going to be costly, right? And so it's like this rubber band, this tension that ends up happening developmentally, and they want to be independent, yet still they're lacking skills and they're not really ready to be independent. So those things are going on, and it's helpful to become aware of it so you can normalize it. Like, this is all part of where they are at developmentally. So they're not bad kids, and they do lack some skills, so they do need support. Now, we cannot make them, right? So what I want you to think of, okay, is I want you to think about what it looks like to coach your kids. Now, I hear what you're saying. It's like, no, Cheryl, my kid won't do it. Coach them. What does that look like? Well, first of all, you have to pick your battles, and you have to think about, what can I control and what can't I control? And for any of you that are journalers or love to write things down to kind of help, that's how I am. I do this in the inner circle, where I make all these worksheets for the moms to be able to say, okay, I can control this and I can't control this. And this is why it's so hard when you have a tweener teen, because you can't control things like you could when they were young. And if you have a strong-willed one, I remember my strong-willed one from a very young age, I would try to put those cute bows in her hair and she would rip them out. It was like, and I was always so envious of the mom that had their little girl, had the cute little bow in her hair at church, and she looked so cute. And that wasn't happening. And yet I think back and I was trying to force that bow into her hair. And, and I think now, I think, why? Why was I trying to do that? It was more about me. It wasn't about her. It was about how it reflected on me. I wanted to look like the mom that had it all together, and my kid looked so cute and put together and their bow and everything. But she didn't want the bow in her hair. And that was a battle I did not need to fight. And so when we fight with our strong-willed kids, it's not going to work when we try to control them. So screaming doesn't help. And a lot of us grew up in families where there was screaming going on. And so it passes down to us a lot of the times, and we end up being screamers. And so we end up screaming. And so what do you do when you're screaming, when you notice that you're doing that? Well, you have to have something else, some other things that you can do. It's not just stop screaming. It's what can I do instead? So number one, okay, you have to realize it's going to hurt your relationship. It doesn't work, and you're not going to be effective. It doesn't work. It's not effective, and it's going to hurt your relationship. I think that we need to see that very clearly, that it is not going to get you what you want when it comes to your kid. And it's not really about us getting what we want with our kid, but I say that because we do want those things. We do want to raise responsible, loving, kind kids, right? So when I say get you what you want, it's more fostering and cultivating those character traits in your kid. Now, number two, it is your relationship and what you model that has the most influence over your kid. We have to trade in control and trying to teach and ask ourselves, what are we modeling? How are we influencing our kids for good? And so if you are kind, if you are practicing healthy conflict resolution skills and dealing with things when they get heated and modeling that for your kid, they are going to learn it from you. We tend to want to focus on our kids and see them as the problem versus how are we going to show up and how are we going to be really with our kids. And the most important things that we can do is to create this relationship where we're a safe place for our kids to come and open up. But if you're yelling, you have taken the bait. And what do I mean by that? You're fueling the fire. When we're yelling and screaming, it's like adding logs on a fire. And we have to just stop and we have to disengage. And so I would say, where are you taking the bait? It's like our kids throw something out and we get hooked and we engage. And then it just escalates into this power struggle. So we got to get unhooked. Okay, so that's the first question. And when you are modeling this, it's going to help your kid more than anything else. And I also just want to add, it is a process. Sometimes we just want things fixed right away so we don't have to feel all the feelings around it. Like if you're in a really painful place right now, I get it. And it's hard to sit in that discomfort and we want to make it better right away. But I just want to say you got to trust this process that I talk about every week and think about, how do I want to show up? Where might I be taking the bait? Okay, She pushes every boundary and limit and has no problem lying or manipulating if it will get her out of trouble. So this is one where there's a strong-willed kid there. But I would say when we're met with a lot of disrespect or lying or manipulation, if you just kind of drill it all down, it's a relationship problem. And so I would say, really spend more of your time thinking about, how do I connect with this kid? How can I do something where I take them to Starbucks, right? And we go through the drive-through together. And if it's really, finding different ways where your kid, you can talk to them. And I refer to this as inflammation. If the relationship is really inflamed, you got to think about, how can I bring that inflammation down? Where are some of those areas that I'm really getting hooked in? I have a mom that she was just talking about her son and some things that she's fighting with him constantly. So one of the things that we tweezed out is, where are you fighting these battles? And you're engaging with your son and he's telling you to back off. And it's over things like brushing teeth, right? And they aren't brushing their teeth. And why? Well, because the more that you are nagging, reminding, lecturing, badgering, that kid, if they're strong-willed, they are going to fight you. They're not going to brush their teeth. Strong-willed kids, when you're riding them all the time, they're not going to do it. So what is a better way? Well, depending upon the age of your kid, you can make them a checklist. You can say, okay, here, I get it. Join them in this process. There's things I forget to do. See, it might not be brushing my teeth, but other things to be responsible, I forget to do. And so maybe for your kid, if they're younger, they need a checklist, like, these are the things in the morning. And then you can say, if I'm driving you nuts reminding you, I am going to not do it anymore. Okay? I hope you'll brush your teeth. I care about you. I want to be a good mom. I want to raise you to brush your teeth. I don't want you to get cavities. But you know what? That is a battle I'm not willing to fight, because it's hurting our relationship. And so I'm just going to let you choose if you're going to brush your teeth or not. See, it's letting go of that fight, and it's actually trying it out and seeing what happens. But actually, I said to this mom, because she gets so hooked, I'm like, what else are you going to do? And she said, I'm going to go out to my car and sit in my car so I can't actually even hear the toothbrush going. So, but this is, now deodorant, that's another one. And I loved, oh gosh, I want to think of her name, Michelle Ickard. And she wrote a great book, 14 Conversations You Need to Have. I had her on the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast, 14 conversations you need to have with your kid before they turn 14. But it's a great book, even if your kid is older than 14. But this is a perfect example. She said, it is a new practice, a new skill, when your kid starts wearing deodorant. They're not used to putting deodorant on. And so she said, buy 5 deodorants, put one in the pocket of the car. If you take them to school, they can put it on in the car. Have one in the bathroom downstairs. If you have a 2-story, have one in the living room or the family room or the kitchen, so that when they realize they forgot to put deodorant on, it's right there. So that is where you're coming alongside of your kid and you are supporting them and you're on their team, and you're not lecturing, you're not reminding constantly. It's like, hey, I'm going to help you out because this is something you're learning. Executive functioning, your kid might drive you nuts because they are disorganized. Again, that's a skill. That is a skill that they're still learning, and they haven't learned how to be organized. And so then we have to ask ourselves a question, okay, is it working that I'm getting in there and I'm trying to control things and I'm trying to get them organized and it's not working. So what do I do instead? This is where what I was talking about at the beginning, coaching. You know what? I'm noticing that it's hard, it's not easy, doesn't come naturally for you to get organized. And we have to watch because that can really, it can raise the hair on the back of our necks when our kid is forgetting things, losing things. Their backpack looks like a bomb went off in it. They can't find anything. It's all crumpled up, right? And especially if you're organized, that's going to drive you crazy. But to say to them, how can I support you? Instead of telling and nagging and lecturing, what might be helpful for you? So that's what coaching is. How can I support you? And maybe it's getting a tutor for a short period of time. Maybe it's getting an executive coach, somebody that can come in. I know for all of my kids, well, not my son so much, but my two daughters, they struggled with organization. And so do I still to this day. It takes me, I really have had to work on systems. I have 3 different calendars. I have a lot of different things that I have learned that help me to stay organized, but it does not come naturally. I am ADD. I'm can be all over the place, and it's a skill that I've had to work at. So I ended up getting my daughter a tutor, both of them, all 3 of them actually, that could help them in getting organized, even when we couldn't afford to do it. When my oldest was younger, I still spent some money to get somebody. I had a teacher from the school that would come in and that would help teach those organizational skills. And I wish I had somebody that helped me to do that, even how to study for tests, because if your brain doesn't work that way, it's not easy for your kid. And every kid wants to do well. Okay, so moving along here. This is how my life has been with my 16-year-old daughter. So she didn't really ask any questions. Oh, I know what I want to speak to. So about the lying and the manipulating that will keep her out of trouble. So how can you, now, first of all, I just want to tell you, all tweens and teens are going to lie. And studies have been done that show that actually when they're in middle school, they actually will lie more. And it's not as much to stay out of trouble, although it sure seems like that would be a great motivator. But a lot of it is because they don't want, the studies showed that they don't want to disappoint. They don't want to have that disappointment. So just think about that. What is going on maybe that your kid thinks that they have to lie and manipulate? And how can you revisit with your kid, maybe what some of your limits are, and actually say, okay, like start with one thing. I'm noticing, that you've been lying to me. And I want us to have a relationship. See, I'm noticing, I want to have a better relationship with you. And I want to talk about the lying and, what is causing you to feel like you have to lie to me. And, I understand you want to stay out of trouble. See, I know this isn't easy to do. So I just want to say that I know it's tricky to have these conversations. But again, you want to come alongside of them and say, I want to hear from you and be open. You got to be really careful not to get defensive, where your kid can come and they can say, well, I feel like you're overly strict. And then you need to ask yourself, is that true? Could you maybe be not giving them enough freedom? And then you can talk about the line. I want to give you, see, boundaries allow you actually to give more freedom because everybody's clear. Because you want to figure out, where are your limits? A lot of the time we're flying by the seat of our pants. And there's not really any agreed to limits, and your kid doesn't even know what they are. So first of all, figure out what you can control and what you can't. Then you want to think about Where do you need to set one? Just start with one limit. Maybe it's curfew. Maybe it's disrespectful talk where they're not talking respectfully. And you got to think about, okay, you're not talking respectfully to me. And so when you're not talking respectfully to me, this is going to be the consequence. You will lose your phone for one day, or you will lose your phone for 4 hours, or whatever you come up with. And then you have to follow through. Now you also, and I have a really well priced, it's $10. I have a disrespect workshop that I did. You have to figure out what is disrespectful behavior. See, that's another one. Sometimes if you're cracking down on every eye roll, you're going to be fighting constantly. And so there's some things you have to think, is it worth it to be fighting about that? And is that just adding fuel to the fire in our relationship and building more conflict, power struggles, disrespect, and contempt? And what can you let go of? And what do you maybe need to focus more on? So maybe you can let go of an eye roll and not get hooked in that. But if they're name calling, that is a no-go. And to say to them, this is very important. I want you to feel like you can talk about what you're angry about, because anger is not a bad emotion. It's how we deal, how we express our anger. And if we're lashing out, which if we're yelling at our kid, we're teaching them to lash out. See, they're gonna have that behavior. If we're screaming at them, then why can't they scream back? We're screaming, right? It's kind of like having a double standard. And so we kind of have to clean up our side of the street first, and then say, I'm working on this too. This is something that I'm going to be working on. And I realize I'm not good at keeping my cool. I'm a yeller. And so I'm going to work on that right along with you. So thinking about how can you come alongside of them? How can you say, I'm noticing we're having this issue and I want to talk about it. And also, I want to trust you, but lying, when you lie to me, then that makes me feel like I want to control you more. And you don't want that. And you know what? I don't want that either. So let's talk about and hear from them. That's where we have to be, shut our mouths and zip them. And we have to listen to what they have to say. And it doesn't mean we give in, but we can say, I hear that you feel like I'm really strict. I get that. And you still have to come home by midnight for curfew, because that's the law. And that's just the way it is. You had to come home by 11 o'clock and because that's what the law is. And so there's a no-go there. And you keep firm, and then you have to have the consequences, and you have to follow through. And that is why it can be so good to think about, like, write down consequences, like write down what don't you like, right? And what do you want? You can, if you're a journaler, that's really helpful for you to get clear, because you know what, that's where it all starts. Like, we have to get clear. And if we're not clear, we're going to be like, woo, right? Which was what I was like. I would fight, and then my daughter would hate me, and then I would feel so bad. And then what would I do? Then I would give in so she could like me. But then the next time something happened and I said no, then I had given in the time before. It's like giving a toddler a cookie. They cry, they whine, you give them the cookie. What happens next time? You try to say no. You have to be willing to put up with the whining and the crying. There's probably going to, maybe it was 3 minutes before, and you gave them the cookie. Now it's going to be 6 minutes. And so I remember seeing this one mom, and I so related, where her son he kept throwing something kept throwing it out of his stroller, and she would pick it up and give it back to him. And then he would throw it. Of course, he was playing that game that they all play, right? But I thought, ooh, I'm like, that is not going to go well for the future. if we keep on giving it to them, right? And they do it again, and then we keep doing it and doing it, we're reinforcing that rather than saying, okay, now I'm just going to hold on to this and just hold on to the toy. It's kind of like we're doing this dance, and then what happens? We resent them, right? And then what do? Then we criticize them. And that is where it perpetuates it. I was not setting the boundary and holding the boundary line. And then I would give in to her. And then I would be mad at her. And then I would end up like grumbling over in the corner about how difficult she was. And I was mad at her. And then it leaked out. And then, poor thing, seriously, could not do anything right because I was so focused on how difficult she was. No. It was me. It was me. It was more about me because why? Because I wasn't clear about my boundaries. I wasn't willing to say, honey, I know you're angry that I won't let you take the train downtown and you're 13 to Chicago with your friends. And I get it that you don't like that. But you know what? Think about what else you can do. Can you invite a friend over? No, I want to go downtown, right? You try to offer something and okay, all right. Well, I get that you're angry, but it's still no. And then we got to just let them sit in their upset. That's another place that we get off track because we don't want them to be upset. So we're trying to convince them that they should come over to our saying that, our way of thinking is right. And that creates a whole nother boundary struggle. They are not going to say, yes, mom, thank you for not letting me ride the train to Chicago to hang out downtown with my friends for the day. And, you're so right. No, they're not going to say that. And so don't try to convince them that you're right, because that's going to enter into, oh boy, that's exhausting. You get into a whole nother ring around the rosy where you're both doing that anger dance and it creates a power struggle. Just validate them. Like, I get it that you want me to say yes. And you know what? And I don't like to say no, to tell you the truth. One of my kids recently, I had to say no. Believe me, it was the right decision to say no. They did not get it. They did not understand why I said no. And I wanted to make them get it. I am always still, you never stop with this. I'm telling you, it's not like one day all of a sudden we arrive. We have to keep practicing it. And so what ended up happening is exactly what I'm telling you. And they said, well, I just don't understand why you said no to this. It just felt blah, 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 right? And they said something. And I said, I get that you don't understand. And it was really hard to say no. And it was like, because I wanted them to get it because I felt so badly. And I had to chalk it up with they're not going to get it. But I know in my heart of hearts that I did the right thing. When we are not setting boundaries, we're going to always be resentful. We're going to be walking around resentful. Feeling resentful is a big red flag that you need boundaries. You need to either be expecting more, or you need to be setting boundaries to what you will not, where that is, what you won't tolerate. And I say tolerate, and I'm a little hesitant because it's like, I won't tolerate that, right? Where we have to have that relational conversation. It's not just, I will not, right? That is that punitive, domineering, not relational. It's let's sit down and talk about this together and say, I'm noticing how I'm feeling about this. I don't like it. I'm going to back off, or this is what I do want. And this is what I don't want. I don't want to be fighting with you. I don't want to be butting heads. So I'm not going to be on you about your homework. I'm going to take a step back. And I'm just going to ask you if I can support you. If your kid says, and maybe you signed up for that homework battles, it's free. There's another one at part 2 that I give really tangible steps that I think it's $10. But You can sign up for the free homework battles, but back off if they're telling you to. From a mom that argued and fought that battle, it was so not worth it. Our kids are like whack-a-moles, they're all developing at different times. Think about how you can unplug from them and let them be more responsible and experience. I was going to say suffer, but experience some of those natural consequences, and instead think about how can you come in and say, how can I support you? Is there anything you need help with? Would you like me to get somebody that might be able to help you? You see, it's very different. And then they usually are going to say no, just so you know right away. And then you can say, I see you're over your head and you're drowning a little bit, but I am going to listen to you. And you know what? Think about it and you can let me know. See, that's positive control because they can sit with it and think about it. And maybe 7 or 8 times out of 10, they said, I did think about it. And this is what I need, this is what I could use help with. They will ask you, but see, it's on their terms. And that is what you want them to own it, not you owning it for them, because that never works. So let them own it and you will notice that, and try it. I always say to moms, say, I'm going to try this a little experiment and I'm going to back off for 1 week and I'm going to see where we're at. And then just try it and see what happens. Usually, they are demanding at this age. They're very self-absorbed. And if we jump, like some of us, and I used to be a tap dancer and a jumper, they say something and jump and you can do it because you want to keep them happy and you want them to like you, even though we don't want to tell anybody because we all say, oh, don't be your kid's friend, right? But sometimes, the truth is, especially if you've got a difficult kid, you feel so badly because there's so much just conflict going on that we want them to like us and we feel guilty, blah, 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 right? All that stuff. But I would say that you teach them, you know what? I don't like how you're asking. See, this is where we can say what we don't like. That's a good boundary. I don't like how you're talking to me right now. I don't like it. And in fact, that does not make me want to take you in the mall, let me tell you, when you demand that. And then just be quiet and see what they say. So you give them a little bit of truth-telling feedback. When you talk to me like that, I am not going to do it, and don't, and then don't. And then you can say something like, when you do want something, I expect you to come to me and ask it for it kindly, respectfully, not demanding. And maybe if you've been giving in to your kid when they demand things, we need to stop it and we need to tell them we're going to stop it. So, I've been giving in to you on this when you've been demanding, and I've realized that it's not good for our relationship, and so I'm not going to do it anymore. I have told this story before about my daughter when I finally gave her laundry. I handed it over to her because she couldn't find a shirt and she would be yelling, where did you put my shirt, right? Where did you put it? And it became my fault. And I remember that day where I was like, honey, have at it. Then we've got to leave the dirty laundry in the hamper and let them wear dirty clothes. See, we don't want to do that because then that means maybe we're bad moms. But a lot of times we don't let the process happen, right? We don't let them experience the consequences of having the dirty clothes in order for them to do laundry. And so we have to step back in order for it to go long enough where they realize they're wearing stinky clothes. And we have to just go, can't stand it. But I will tell you, we have to have things in our lives that we're focusing on that takes us out of being so overly focused on our kids. So I will tell you now, I don't even know with my daughter if she's got dirty clothes or not. I have no idea. I don't really even pay attention anymore. So we got to get unhooked and think this is not a reflection of you. I really think we have to continually say to ourselves, it's not personal, it's developmental. And how can I support my kid developmentally? And that looks different for each one of you. If you get a mom, what would happen is she would keep on going back. It's like that AA saying where you just keep on going back to the same door and knocking on it. It's an Al-Anon state. I think it's more Al-Anon, but you keep on going to that door and opening it up and getting punched in the face. It's like the perfect definition of insanity. We keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting a different result, and then we keep getting punched, right? And so if you're doing that, if you're saying something like, hey, honey, how was your day? And they grumble every day they get in the car, and then you're mad that they're grumbling and they're so grumpy, don't ask them how their day was anymore. Talk to them after and I think that is one mistake we make. They need to decompress. They need to come home. They need to grab a snack. They need to go to their room. They need to cocoon and have that downtime. Talk to them later about it. What did you like about your day? What was hard about your day? See, those are what questions. Get it more, not just how was your day? Fine. What was good part of your day today? Or what didn't you like about your day? They usually like to complain a lot. So what didn't you like about your day is always a good place to start. What if they're doing homework at midnight? Just let them be. I would have a conversation with him or her about it. Kids do need sleep. It's really important to them. But I know a lot of kids that do homework. And this is kind of, gosh, we could do a whole deeper dive on this. And a lot of kids that are perfectionists stay up really late and they stress and they want to do really well and they want to get straight A's. And so they push themselves really hard. So I would be curious if you and I were talking one-on-one, that would be one question. And then what I would say is, okay, they're a perfectionist and they're really hard on themselves. So that's where I would enter into that conversation. I would be wanting to say things like, wow, honey, I notice how hard you work. And that you are so responsible and you care so much about your work and doing well. And I think that is so commendable. Like, I just want to say, I'm so proud of you for that. So you're telling them what they're doing, that you want to be responsible to get your homework done, and that you are so determined to get your homework done that you're staying up to midnight. That you want to get it done. I'm good for you. And I do get concerned that you're still up at 12 midnight. And I do worry about your sleep because your brain right now needs we've written sleep articles. I can't remember. It's like 8 or 9 hours of sleep. And so I do get concerned for you. Do you notice how you feel the next day? That could be maybe even a better question than going in and telling them about their brain. It depends on your relationship with your kid. And you kind of want to sprinkle these things in like seeds. Sometimes we try to get it all in one conversation. And that's not effective. But my daughter was staying up late. And I said to her, do you notice, rather than even saying anything about sleep or anything, I said, do you notice when you go to bed at midnight how you feel the next day? And she said, maybe she didn't say anything at that first time. And then I went back in and I think she came back to me later and she said, I notice I don't feel good. And I said, well, that's really good that you noticed that. So maybe thinking about how can you go to bed a little bit earlier? And scaling back, like, can it be a half an hour earlier? Can you get some work done in study hall? Like, what can you do so you feel better? And so you want to see it feels different. And I would also say, what time are you going to bed? Are you going to bed at midnight? See, that's that modeling again. So it was very interesting because I have grandkids. My oldest one has 2 kids, and they stay up really late when they're here a lot of the time. And I'm the grandma, so they can, and we might watch a movie, and then they go to bed. They're 4 and 6, and it's a Saturday night. But it was really interesting because my husband went to bed at like 9, 8:30, 9, and they went right to bed because he was in bed. And so I would also say, what time are you going to bed? Because then we have to think, okay, maybe I'm modeling. Like, sometimes we want our kids to be organized, but we've got stacks of paper on the dining room table. And so we're like looking at their backpack, and then here we've got the log in our own eye, right? That whole saying, look at the log, and you're looking at the log in, or the speck in your brother's eye, but look at the log in your own, kind of the deal. It can be that way with our kids. And that's where we can say, you know what, I'm going to go to bed a little bit earlier too. And so think of it more, all of you still here, all of you listening, like, what skills might they be lacking? But think about what you can affirm that they are doing, that he is diligent, and that you notice that he does wait to the last minute, and ask him if that's stressful. And if he says yes, he might say no, and then just say, I get concerned about your sleep. Plant that little seed. It's like the circuitry in the brain goes, and they think about it. We're not judging it. And then in another time, you might be able to say, yeah, you said it was stressful. And I think about you with waiting and, to the last minute. And is there another time you can do it that you don't have to stay up so late? Anyway, it was great being with you. You can send me questions. I answer them every Wednesday at 9 a.m. and I love to connect with you. And I hope this was helpful today. So please share any takeaways that you have. I love to hear. All right. See you next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central. All right. Bye.